Hello, everyone. I'm Leonel August Rodriguez, the VP of Business Development for Access Medical Labs. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us on another Access Live, where we bring you insight from leading medical experts. We do ask that all questions are submitted via the Q&A, as they will be answered at the end of our lecture. Today, I am honored to present to you an individual who is near and dear to me. I've personally known him for 15 years, and in this time, I have seen the way he has changed the lives of so many people in such a positive way. He is Access's very own medical director for consultations. He has over 39 years of experience in anti-aging, holistic and integrative medicine, and has hundreds of students worldwide. He has authored 4 books and has written dozens of articles in peer-reviewed journals. Without further ado, from sunny Boca Raton, Florida, Dr. Mitchell Ghen.
Leo, that was so nice. You're like my son. So sweet of you.
It's my pleasure, sir.
All right. Good evening, everyone. This will be a pretty much succinct, direct to point information this evening. We're going to do several of these in the future. But tonight's focus will be on the use of near infrared and molecular hydrogen, which you may or may not be familiar with, but I will certainly do that in the short webinar that we're going to do tonight. I have no potential conflicts, by the way. Of course, you know I am the consultant, as Leo told you, for Access Medical Labs, a compounding pharmacy, and Hugh Light USA, which is particularly their devices that I'm talking about tonight. Since this is not CME, it doesn't matter, but I thought I would let you know anyhow. This is basically what this medicine is all about. If you want to be really good at integrative medicine, and it's I hate to tell you, there's no way to be really good unless you become competent in what we call a 360-degree approach. And I've trained, like Leo was saying, thousands of actual physicians in this approach and continue to do so today. You cannot do one area and expect that you're going to be able to handle all the things and problems that people have. But that's a point only to be made so that we can get into our direct subject tonight. But you see that's on this particular slide right now, many things that are of importance. All of them need to be addressed. All of them should be used as part of a total protocol. And these are the things that we will eventually be integrating. However, we do want to talk about photobiomodulation, which of course in this case will be infrared, as we'll talk about and make you very competent in. And as you may or may not know, there are many medical gases. Everyone's pretty familiar with use of oxygen. Some may, older physicians, CO2 in some issues. But tonight we will focus on one specific medical gas, which is molecular hydrogen, which has so much great capability. And you'll, after listening to this, you'll realize how you don't have these two components, even though you have several of the others, you're going to be missing a massive amount of information that you can actually give to your patient. Not information, but also something that will help them in your 360-degree approach. So let's get into this. Infrared is part of course, the electromagnetic spectrum. And they do, as you can see, we can go from the certain invisible radiation, and you see UV lights here, and then X-rays, and it keeps going to cosmic. And then in the middle, you'll see the visible radiation spectrum, which is what we see, ending with red over here to the right. And then we get into the invisible radiation, which is the infrared that we're going to be talking about. Now, infrared is broken into 3 categories. And you could see, if you look over here in 3 categories, what wavelength actually makes up each of them. It's unimportant at this moment to know, but I will talk about it a little bit in a minute. But there are 3 areas. The one we're going to be focusing on is near. There is some activity medically in mid, and there is almost no activity as far as what we call PBM, and that's this here, photobiomodulation. You'll not see that appear in the far area, and I will show you in a minute. So when we're talking about a medical use, other than perhaps making someone sweat, we are literally talking here in the near infrared category. Well, near infrared used to come out of incandescent bulbs, but they took them away. As you know, you can hardly get any incandescent bulbs around, maybe some for cosmetic use. But the incandescent bulbs that were between 2400 and 2800 Kelvin actually did give off some infrared. Now, the sun actually gives off infrared, but the sun's Kelvin is 5500. It's a much brighter illumination than the incandescent light is, of course. Now, in the 1950s, we had these bulbs, and these bulbs, even though they try to say they didn't last as long, they weren't as good for 100 reasons, but they did give off some infrared in this area. So we try to talk about what infrared does, where does it come from, and what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about LLLT, this. We call this low-level light therapy. How do you distinguish low-level light therapy? You distinguish it from actually a high level of light or a laser light that will cut by once you get over 100. This is going to be low level. And the question is, what does it exactly do? Well, near infrared spectrum can penetrate pretty much up to 4 inches, as I put over here on the slide for you. That's pretty deep. And the question is, even though it does go 4 inches deep, what does it do that allows us to have any benefit whatsoever, which we'll get into? First, be aware that infrared does not follow the typical light law of reciprocity, which is the Bunsen-Roscoe law, which basically says if you increase the amount of power, you'll get more power and more joules, or which is joules are power. And therefore, if we push a lot of power, we might be able to use more, less dose and less pulse than X. That is not the truth for near infrared. I will show you how it works in a moment. But you need to know that one of the measurements that's extremely important is called iridescence, meaning how much radiation is there, how much. So when we're talking about a particular infrared bed that we will tonight, you're talking about 38,000 LEDs at one time, which obviously will give you a significant iridescence, and just like the sun does at the right time of day. If you take that amount of iridescence and you keep whatever you're trying to irradiate, you multiply it by how close you are, you end up with power, and the power will be measured in joules. Keep that in mind for a minute. It'll become much clearer in just a moment. Now, in humans, we have what's called a biphasic dose response. More does not necessarily mean better. And, there are Western thought medicine often does that, give one pill, 2 are better. But we know very much whether it's an herb, a vitamin, a mineral, or an actual pharmaceutical, giving more and more does not necessarily increase the effectiveness. And many times it may increase the actual danger and safety of that particular drug. So in infrared, we want to have a certain level, and beyond that, no more. And that's the key to being able to use infrared safely. And of course, that is important. Now, there is an important part of this slide that I just want to take 2 seconds to tell you about. Did you ever wonder why animals, and we have about 22 of them, my wife and I, when we see animals, we don't notice that they get burned by UV light during the day. It's very rare to see that. And the reason is because the preconditioning of the skin with near infrared A, which occurs early in the morning, which the animals are outside, they are much less susceptible to UVB damage. Now, that NIR comes up again later in the day, and that is about, when the sun starts to go down. Matter of fact, if you ever get burned, one of the ways to heal that burn is to use the healing rays, which are, of course, the near infrared, meaning that if you did get a burn and you went back outside in the time where the infrared was more prominent, either early in the morning or late in the evening, it would help heal the burned skin. So we're talking about that early morning light, which is the near infrared. Now, we notice there's an optical window for most of near infrared to do its job. It's between 600 nanometers and 1200 nanometers. And we do know that if you want to compare something, you compare it to the sun, which peak you'll see is 40 milliwatts per centimeter squared. So if you want to get some sort of efficacy from some infrared source, it would have to equilibrate pretty much to what the sun will give you, which basically is 40 milliwatts per centimeter squared. Most of the day it's 20, but at peak it's at 40 and no more than 20 minutes, which is not important. And we already said less than 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared does not heat tissue and will not cut. The interesting part of infrared sunlight, because you're wondering, well, how much is it? Well, as I pointed out on this last point, it's 40% of the sunlight spectrum is NIR, near infrared. Now, what's the big deal about this? Why am I even bother talking about this? Because we're taking a subject and we're saying, hey, this is important to our protocol. And I think people pretty much know that if you get into the sun, people that get sunshine or get out there during the day and early parts of the day, not only do they get a better dose of vitamin D if they're in the sun and exposed appropriately for the amount of time, but if they get the infrared exposure, they're also healthier. There is a study that showed one time that people that are diagnosed in summer having cancer, not that the cancer started in summer, didn't matter when it started, it was diagnosed in summer, they actually had a much longer life from the cancer. And the reason being is they typically stopped, went outside, got this, and started to smell the roses, something probably we all should be doing long before there is any engagement in any type of disease entity. But the key to all this are really in two areas. You can read the slide yourself, but I want to point out two areas that are most important when it comes to infrared. This, because infrared done properly will increase the microcirculation. The microcirculation is the tiny circulation that is terminal in your body. You go from a large vessel, smaller, and eventually it terminates in the capillaries, venules, arterioles, etc. There's no bypass around them because it's the terminal end. There is no angioplasty to be done in these particular vessels because they're smaller than a hair. And of course, there's no stent either because there's no stent smaller than a hair. But what you're probably not aware of is that 46% of heart attacks actually occur in the microcirculation. It looks sometimes as if it's from a small vessel, but because the microcirculation becomes compromised, the vessel prior to it begins to look like it was compromised. And that's how this particular event, whether it's a stroke or heart attack, occurs. So the microcirculation is of utmost importance. One of the problems with microcirculatory disease, which, by the way, is most prominent in four populations. One happens to be the diabetic, two is men, three are smokers, and four are anybody that's on chronic stress. Okay, that's everyone on this webinar tonight. So those are the people that are most likely to have this problem. And the benefit of near infrared is to go 4 inches deep, affect the microcirculation from head to toe, and increase, of course, the NO, the nitric oxide, but also help it to reestablish itself. How does it do that? Well, it does it because there are chromophores. And the chromophores are something in our cells that accept light. They bring in the light. And hence, the second reason I wanted to tell you on this, which is of real importance, is mitochondrial damage. As you get older, mitochondrial damage is inevitable. And the problem is mitochondrial damage, and we teach a course I do for Nova University for pharmacists and healthcare practitioners every year, which is cancer is a mitochondrial disorder. There's no question it is. And there's no question there are things that you could be doing as a healthcare provider to make a difference in these patients. So one of the things that we always think about, and yes, we could talk about the others, pain, inflammation, they're evident. That is the mitochondria, that it will help. And if you increase nitric oxide, increase ATP, and you increase cytochrome oxidase, of course, things start to get better. And there are bands for near infrared and the very end of the spectrum, which I showed you early, for visible light. So does light help the mitochondria? Absolutely. Does light health, the microcirculation, absolutely. And so it becomes an integral part of treatment in literally probably a great many of the patients that walk through the door. Beginning after the 30s and 40s, your mitochondria begin to fail to begin with. So this is a important reminder to you. I told you before that far infrared is no help in photobiomodulation. The problem is because the water is absorbed at 980 nanometers. So once you go above that sweet range I showed you a few slides before, the water in your body is going to absorb that far infrared. So what happens? Yeah, you get warm, it feels good, you sweat, and all the properties that are healthy from that end are okay. However, the one thing that you need to know, and if you have an infrared sauna, which is a far infrared sauna, you must remember, here's the visible spectrum, and here VS, and then you'll have the, right after the red here, you'll have the infrared, and then it'll go mid-infrared, and then you'll go far infrared. The very next spectrum that you saw over here was microwave, EMF. Now, I don't know about you, but if I wanted to get into a sauna and sweat, I wouldn't want to do it with 36 cell phones surrounding me. And that's what this will do if it comes over. So go buy yourself, if you have one, or one of your patients have one, something called a Gauss meter. I think I wrote it correctly. The Gauss meter is a measurement of electromagnetic radiation. So if that needle goes, from, it looks like this, it's here, and then suddenly it jumps all the way up when you turn or put it in or close to your far infrared, I would not be using that particular item. And yes, you should check every one because there's no obligation for the different manufacturers to put any of their brains or even care about looking into it. But since we care for you, we want you to look into it yourself. Let's sidestep into molecular hydrogen. Molecular hydrogen, everybody knows hydrogen. It is the creation, it's the smallest molecule. It's the creation of life comes from hydrogen. Well, a lot of Japanese research, and I don't mean a little, there is lots of replete in the literature, research on molecular hydrogen that makes it a perfect additive to help people in so many different areas. One of the things that we know about molecular hydrogen, and this is probably the key takeaway, is that it's a selective antioxidant. Selective means that it will quell the hydroxyl free radical and the OONO, the peroxynitrate free radical, which are pretty much the most irritating because this can cause DNA to break. So you do want to do whatever you can to do it. And we have seen, genes that are helped through the inhalation of molecular hydrogen is extremely safe. It's an easy process to use. So many diseases can actually be helped by breathing in this. And I'll talk to you and tell you about a couple of case studies that we've recently done. And so it is an antioxidant. It is an anti-inflammatory. It is a modulator of apoptosis. So, and it's a vasodilator. So by those four things, it makes it a specific and amazing component and helpful component to pretty much what you're doing, because there is no way of doing this. And with the other things that we saw on the screen earlier in the 360 approach, that will approach this type of modality. So the molecular hydrogen actually increases a factor called NRF2, and of course that increases antioxidant status. Probably some other time of the year we'll go into it in a more scientific dive, but for tonight at least realize that this can help your DNA not be hurt. It is excellent in patients we've seen 30 to 35% improvement in patients with Parkinson's, reduction of medications, revascularization in stroke patients. And then, as I said, I will give you a quick protocol that we use, or something we did that you'll see in a patient, we actually did a lot of it, but I'll tell you in a minute a little bit. So again, it's protect from radiation. You matter of fact, if you went on an airplane ride, many you not wear, that's even an 8-hour airplane ride is equivalent. I've seen once of smoking 200 cigarettes as to the damage it does to the genetic pool. So it's probably one of the great things, and it does protect from the EMF damage. So if you're going to use your little sauna, you might as well breathe in molecular hydrogen at the same time. And it does have one other area that it overlaps into. As we said, it is anti-inflammatory. It is that it is a modulator of apoptosis. It should be O. And it is a wonderful antioxidant and vasodilator. But again, you see here, it does help with the mitochondrial function. So you have two devices that are natural, basically overlapping to be able to help this. So this is just a compilation slide to tell you of some of the things it does. One of them that I will tell you that's extremely important is the mid column for a moment, and that is it increases aerobic respiration and decreases lactate production, which makes therefore a more ATP. To take you back to biochemistry just for 1 second, one molecule of glucose enters the cytosol and it goes to pyruvate, and then pyruvate, some will go to lactate, and then eventually it goes through the Krebs cycle and then through the electron transport, and eventually over here it will make net 36 ATPs. And of course, this doesn't do that as you get older. Diabetics don't do that, and certainly cancer patients don't. And the body's mechanism of trying to keep a cell alive or not will either it will choose to create apoptosis, or it will choose another pathway. And the other pathway is accentuated for many reasons by taking pyruvate and making it into lactate or lactic acid, and it does it very quickly. It keeps doing it. That's how cancer does it. This is called, by the way, Warburg effect. If you've been reading, you know something about it. So when you're using molecular hydrogen, it helps to decrease this lactate production, which you all know changes the pH, will change how the body functions and the cell functions. The others are something we can talk about in another lecture. These are the references on this. You can read a lot. These are just maybe a dozen. There, as I said, there are thousands of lectures on this as well. But I want to just tell you a case study very quickly. We were at a conference. I was lecturing at the AMMG about 2 months ago. A very nice lady came up. She was a helper, or not a helper. She was a sister of another woman. She had Parkinson's, and also she had some brain trauma from concussions in the past. I said, do you mind if we test you? We tested her using a WAVI, which is another lecture for another time, which is probably the best look and test at a physiological brain. So we did that, and she had some severe areas. One of them, she had very low voltage coming from the brain, which is typical of someone who's had concussive effort. So we put her on the molecular hydrogen for 1 hour, redid it. She had 120% increase. Was it perfect? No. But was it obviously better? Yes. 1 week ago, and I'll close it and let Leo come back. 1 week ago, I had a group of people from 4 countries. We do seminars in our office for practices. They came in and we literally did all this testing. I love to do experiential access labs with there. We check the participants' blood. We do all this. We put them through all this testing. It's kind of neat. And then we put them through these things like molecular hydrogen, like infrared. We had 2 people had similar problems in different areas. We put them on the molecular hydrogen, and every single one of them, we did 2 or 3 of them, if I recall, but each of the parameters that were abnormal in 1 hour changed to the benefit. So do I know for a fact that there is considerable evidence in the literature? Yes, most of it's outside the country, but I'm starting to write some of the papers inside the country, but that doesn't often make any difference. Is it something to me now that is absolutely necessary in a 360-degree approach to the patient, no question. Just like blood work is imperative, so is now the way we start treating these patients as well. Thank you, by the way, for listening. Leo, I'll come back so you can see me. I think I can do that. I'm going to stop broadcasting and then come back. Okay, Leo, I'm back.
Dr. Ghen, I would like to thank you for such an incredible lecture on NR therapy. We do have quite a few questions in the Q&A. The first one is, so is far infrared bad?
No, it's not bad at all. It's just part of the spectrum. It's like anything else. I would answer the question back. Is a baby aspirin bad? Well, if you're having a GI bleed, yes. But if you need anticoagulant and you want to help the endothelial lining of the cell, then it would be good. But there's that balance, how much? And the same thing as that I was saying with the near infrared. So is far bad? Not at all. If you like to sweat, and I mean, I like it. I like the way I feel. But if I get into a far infrared, that is actually spilling into that microwave or microwave area, then I'm getting, it's what I said, I exaggerated, but that it's like me sitting with cell phones all around me that are all talking at the same time. How healthy could that be to the cells? And there's plenty of studies that tell you it's not. So it's good as long as it does not encroach into the other area, as good as you realize it's for sweating and relaxation, but not for changing that mitochondria, not for increasing the deep microcirculation. You need the NIR, the near infrared.
Excellent, and I hope that that answers the question that we had. A few more questions to go. What would you recommend the duration and consistency of NIR treatment for your patients?
You need to have 20 minutes. Really, if you have the right jewel that I was teaching earlier, 20 minutes seems to be the perfect time in an NIR. And not only is that the perfect time, but using it pretty much every other day. So we try to encourage our patients to be in it 3 days a week. And, when you're treating, and as things get better, then less, of course, but in the treatment phase and trying to stimulate the chromophores, et cetera, 3 times a week, 20 minutes each time.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. So you touched on far infrared, you touched on near infrared. Another question, what is the deal with mid infrared?
Well, mid infrared also has a benefit as well. I mean, it does have some modulation. It helps certain, with joints and muscles, etc. But its capability is not as great. And we only make those designations based upon the wavelength. You know that, right? So it's really one group. It's infrared, but where you are on the infrared is where the benefits occur, and most of them occur obviously in the NIR area.
Excellent. And is there a specific time of date, or is that even relevant, as to when you suggest patients go in for NIR treatment?
No, it doesn't matter. I thought you meant if they would go outside. I would explain that would be in the early morning or the late afternoon, but it does not matter when they get it. It's not like you have to get it exactly cycled with the time of the solar radiation.
Excellent. And I think we may have a pediatrician in the audience. Is this safe for pediatric patients?
Of course, it would be, and the pediatric. That's a good question, by the way. It would definitely be. It's very safe because it's the same. There's a whole argument. You don't even need to wear goggles in near infrared. We do, because there has been a study or two that says maybe it can increase cataract. I put it on. I used to go in without putting it on. Of course, not have a cataract. No, I'm kidding. But but it is safe because it would be the same thing. It would maybe a little dose dependent, less depending on size, because of the size. But near infrared is not the heating. It's not going to dehydrate that child. It's the same thing of taking a child outside in the sun in the early morning. Is it safe? Absolutely, doctor. Thanks for asking.
Excellent. And this is a very good question. How about the sauna? Since we touched on all three, far, mid, near, right? How about the saunas, which deliver all three types of IR wavelengths? They claim that they are better.
Yeah, well, everybody tries it. It's very good. It's very difficult to be everything to everyone. I think any of the practitioners and pediatricians, whoever is on tonight or ever watches this in the future, it's very easy to be good at everything. Except, there are restaurants that are broad, fast restaurants, and the restaurants that specialize. And typically, you find the ones that specialize or do a better job. And the same is with that too. There's nothing wrong, again, with getting all of them. It's lovely if you have one in your house that can deliver, for example, all the ranges. That's good. But again, you have to think about is and how much is it delivering? Are you getting the joules that are required? Is it enough? Now, when I was the one for example, I used in the office, the infrared, near infrared bed, as I was telling you, I think earlier, and I think I mentioned it too during the lecture, there was 38,000 LEDs in there, and it's positioned so it literally gets you from head to toe, every side. It is within the right inches for the most people. Of course, obviously, someone's a little bit smaller, whatever, that a 20-minute treatment will get you those 40 the 40s micro watts per centimeter squared that you need. I mean, so could you get everything from something? Potentially, but I don't believe you would get the great effect medically that you're looking for. For home, yes. For medical, no.
Fair enough. Last question, I promise.
Okay.
All right. Would you do PEMF bed in addition to NAD IV infusion to improve mitochondrial function?
Would I do that?
You do that, yes.
I don't do that, but that was a good question, whoever asked it. I don't use PEMF. Well, I just didn't tell the truth. One of the things that we use is a plate, and it's not a power plate, looks like it, but it does put in some of the PEMF. What we do normally is I'll take someone on IV, and if you wanted me specifically, could you do NAD? Sure, you could do NAD. You could use L-carnitine. You could use whatever might help that mitochondria. Put them simultaneously on this plate, which is a Korean thing, and puts in the PEMF. Move them to a full encompassing infrared bed, absolutely. While then we take them off while they're on the IV and put them on molecular hydrogen. By the way, we do one step after that. We put them into mid-level hyperbaric. So I guess that's a discussion for later. But would I do it? Sure, I definitely would do it.
Beautiful. Listen, would you be mad at me if I asked you two more questions? I know I said it was my last one, but these are great questions.
No, because I'm mad at you already. So what difference does it make? I'm kidding. Go ahead. What do you got?
All right. So given that this is a non-CME lecture, I think you can speak on I guess the company that you use for this. What Gauss meter do you recommend?
Look, I'm not a Gauss meter expert. I would go on to, you can find them. They're about $49 on Amazon if you choose to use that source. And, you want to get one that, that just measures the electromagnetic field. You'll know if it's working, because you're going to just put it near your cell phone to start, and you'll see some radiation, and then go ahead and make a call. Once you hit send, that needle will go to the other side. Now turn it off and take that same meter into your nice, beautiful sauna that's making you warm and hot, make you feel good. And again, if that needle jumps, I would give it back, or which maybe you can't, just I wouldn't use it anymore. By the way, that's exactly what happened to me. Just so you know, I had an infrared thing, and someone said to me, Mitch, do you know that it could be cell phone? I was ignorant as well at the time, and I said, what are you talking about? It gave me the Gauss meter to take home. I went into my thing, I turned it on, never used that phone again. Never.
Wow.
Because when you think about the damage of cell phone radiation, and you're sitting in a sauna that's doing the same, and like I said, there is no benefit, and they have no incentive to really check it unless they brag about it. In other words, if we don't, we have it, we're right on the far infrared, that's one thing. But if you don't see any bragging rights about it, and they haven't been tested, before I would even consider buying one, I would say, I want to test your thing for far infrared, or I want to see your papers that you've tested it, and they haven't.
Excellent. Fair enough. I have an infrared sauna, so I may have to test my personal one.
No,
Um,
you should, not you
I
may,
should.
you
I
should
should.
definitely. Go
I
ahead.
definitely should. Last question.
Okay.
So hydrogen tablets, are they effective at all?
Minimally. There are some that are a little better than others. That's making hydrogen water. And there are even hydrogen like baths, like their ozone baths. That's another medical gas, of course, that we use that work to a degree as well. But I use a high flow, type of nasal cannula that puts about 20, something like that. It's very fast liters per minute. This machine is a machine. What it does, it takes water and splits it, of course, into the O2 and hydrogen. So it's 2 molecules of hydrogen that the person's breathing in, 1 molecule of oxygen, and it produces 2,200 per minute. And it is very effective. Is the pills anywhere near this? No. No. And hydrogen is such a small molecule, just by breathing it in, it goes everywhere. So literally, for any type of process based upon the 4 properties I told you, it does make a difference. And most likely the case that we saw and the doctors that we did in our conference, Leo, that got a result that quickly was probably, in my opinion, I just wrote one of the papers up, but in my opinion, it's most likely because of its vasodilatory effect. So I think, changing antioxidant status would be much harder to do in an hour time, to recognize, but it's easy to recognize changes in the brain from these physiologic tests. And I believe it's because of that, the vasodilatory effects that the molecular hydrogen has. So
Very well said.
Did I answer every question possible?
I think you have answered every question. And with that, Dr. Ghen, I would like to personally thank you again for such an incredible and informative lecture. If you could please tell the audience how they are able to reach you for peer consultations or possibly becoming a student.
Easy. I had a slide up before. So I'll just give everyone my cell. Love to do that. Makes it easier. And I did have my email on there too. My email is Ghen M, last name. So it's Golf Hotel Echo November Mike at MikeAlphaCharlie.com. GHENM at MAC.com. You can write me, or you could call me, and my cell's 561-789-1588. 561-789-1588. And if you tell me Leo sent you, probably I'll charge you double.
Excellent, sir. I'm very
no, just come. We do a lot of,
please.
Yeah, we do, by the way, for those that are actually interested in this type of technology. In fact, we actually, we do conferences that are actually free as well. And the one we did this weekend with the help of Access, and you weren't there, Leo, but it was so amazing and so successful. No, they did not pay anything to be there. It was a 2-day conference. And like I said to everybody else, we did their blood work and everything else. And that was courtesy of Access Laboratories. So we really appreciate. Yeah, I know that I'm your chief consultant. Doesn't matter. This is a family. When you belong to Access, you belong to a family. And of course, I've been the consultant for 15 years, as you said. So
yes,
it's always nice to have family around you and people that you can trust and go for. Everyone else, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we'll do more of this hopefully in the future. God bless.
Absolutely. Again, thank you, sir. To our audience, thank you for tuning in to another Access Live. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay healthy. Until next time.